Just imagine this for a second. A man buried alive. His muffled pleas for mercy are rising from this deep, dark pit, while right above him, the very people he tried to save are celebrating. They're dancing, they're laughing, they think they've silenced the truth for good. But look, this isn't some scene out of a horror movie. This is a real cautionary tale, a story of a lost civilization that's actually referenced in the Quran and talked about in early narrations. So today, we're going to dive into the absolutely bone-chilling story of the people of al-Rass. We're talking about a civilization that had it all, but they lost everything in the most terrifying way you can think of. Their story? Well, it's a stark warning about just how far people can fall when they turn their back on their creator. So picture this. You've got this land that is just blessed beyond measure. 12 super prosperous villages, all stretched along the banks of this river that was so pure and abundant they called it al-Rass. The fields were green, harvests were incredible, and the people, well, they wanted for nothing. It was a paradise, but a deceptive one. Because all their devotion, all their worship, it wasn't for the one who actually gave them all these blessings. Nope. At the center of their whole world was a single pine tree. Their entire society, their whole identity, became defined by this delusion. They stopped worshiping their creator, and instead they bowed down to a creation. And that one choice, well, it would set them on a path straight to total destruction. And what's wild is just how systemic their idolatry became. It all started with one pine tree, which was said to have been planted by Japheth, the son of Prophet Noah. But as their villages grew, they took its seeds and planted a new holy tree in each one. Then they dug these special channels just to water these new trees, and here's the craziest part. They declared that water sacred. To drink from it was a death sentence. They would literally let their own people and livestock die of thirst, while water flowed freely for trees they planted with their own hands. It's unbelievable. And of course, this delusion had its rituals. Every single month, they'd gather, slaughter their best animals, and burn them in these huge fires until thick black smoke completely covered the tree. In that moment, they would fall to the ground, and a voice, all eerie and high-pitched, would come from the tree's trunk saying, "I am pleased with you." Now, the narrations tell us this was actually Shaitan, the devil, completely deceiving them, but they believed it. They'd erupt into this wild, drunken festival that lasted all night long. But here's the thing. In His infinite mercy, Allah doesn't just destroy a people without first sending them a warning. So He sent them a prophet, a messenger whose entire job was to pull them back from the brink of total destruction. And this right here, this gets to the absolute heart of the conflict. The prophet's message was so simple, so direct. Worship your creator, not a powerless tree. But their response, it was just dripping with arrogance and blind tradition. They couldn't stand the idea of abandoning what their ancestors had done, even when it was so obviously wrong. But He didn't give up. For years, He walked through their villages, calling them to the truth with this incredible patience. And for years, His only reward was ridicule. They laughed at Him, they spit at Him, they even threw stones at Him. But His message, it never, ever wavered. All right, so this brings us to the tragic climax. After years and years of rejection, the prophet went to their grand annual festival. He witnessed the full horror of their rituals. He saw thousands of people just lost in this delusion. And in that one moment, he knew their hearts were completely sealed. All hope was gone. And that raises a terrifying question, doesn't it? When the very person sent to guide you realizes that you are completely, totally unreachable, what comes next? He raised his hands to the sky. And he didn't even pray for their destruction. He prayed for a sign they absolutely could not ignore. He asked Allah to show them the powerlessness of their false gods by making every single one of their sacred trees wither and die. And the prayer was answered instantly. The very next morning, every vibrant green pine tree, including that great mother tree, was gray, brittle, and totally lifeless. The physical proof of their delusion was standing right in front of them, looking like a skeleton. Now, you'd think this would be the wake-up call, right? But no. Instead of seeing this as a sign from God, their twisted minds came to a totally different conclusion. Some of them said the prophet was a sorcerer who cursed their trees. Others said their gods were furious because they'd allowed this prophet to insult them. But both groups agreed on one thing. The prophet had to die. What they did next wasn't just an execution. It was a ritual of calculated cruelty. a horrifying act of violence against a messenger of God. Their approach was just chillingly methodical. First, they drained the sacred spring. Then, they dug a well right under the dead tree, a well so narrow a man could barely fit, let alone move. Then, they lowered the prophet into this vertical prison and sealed the opening with a massive stone. They condemned him to a slow, agonizing death in the dark. And from the depths of that pit, his muffled voice rose up. He wasn't praying for rescue. He knew these people had zero mercy left. He was praying to Allah for his suffering to end, simply asking for the relief of death. And this is the most chilling part of the entire story. As his prayers echoed from beneath the earth, they celebrated. They played music, they drank wine, and they danced on his living grave, totally convinced they had done something righteous to please their false gods. They heard his suffering, and they just celebrated harder. They partied all night long, but their celebration was about to be cut short. Allah had watched every single moment, and his patience had finally run out. Divine wrath was on its way. The divine decree was made. Their punishment wouldn't just be death. Oh no, it would be an eternal lesson for all of humanity, a warning that would be carved into history itself. And then it began. The people woke up to this strange, heavy air. Just before a wind, the color of dried blood just slammed into their villages, throwing them to the ground in a total panic. But there was nowhere to run. The very earth under their feet began to boil. The soil itself transformed into burning, bubbling sulfur, a furnace that there was absolutely no escape from. And as they scrambled on the molten ground, a massive black cloud just blotted out the sun. It didn't rain water. It rained down thousands of burning stones, a literal storm of molten death from above. There was no time to run, no time to regret anything. In a single, unified moment, every man, woman, and child who had participated in or even just stood by and watched this cruelty was struck. Their bodies melted like lead in a furnace, completely and utterly erased from existence. All that was left was scorched earth. You know, the story of the people of al-Rass is just horrifying, but its lessons are timeless. It's a stark reminder of how deep delusion can run, how easily arrogance rejects truth, and that divine justice is absolute, especially for those who don't just commit evil, but celebrate it. So this leaves us with a final, chilling question. What's the ultimate lesson from a civilization that was wiped out for dancing on a good man's grave?